A new nuclear plant at Hinkley gets the go-ahead from the government. Theresa May had put the deal on hold and has now imposed new safeguards on finance and security. We'll be getting the latest from the site and political reaction in Westminster. Also this lunchtime, left brain damaged and paralysed, the sports student arrested and restrained by police outside a nightclub. His mother wants answers.
My hope is I need justice. No matter whatever they did for him, you won't bring him back. But the only thing I need, justice.
More than 100 BBC staff, including household names, will have their salaries revealed under plans for charter renewal. The postcode lottery for the elderly in England. How where you live dictates your level, if any, of care.
And Cockcroft is coming up to the line and he's going to take the gold medal once more and a new world record.
The start of a golden hour. 9 gold medals in 63 minutes as Britain's Paralympians smashed the gold medal tally from London 2012.
Here, a city's north-south divide. Protests about plans to improve one of the region's busiest roads. And the mobile phone app developed in part by teenagers to help monitor mental health.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. After all the toing and froing and a decade of delays, finally the government has given the go-ahead for the new £18 billion nuclear power station at Hinkley in Somerset. But there will be new conditions imposed after Theresa May put the brakes on the deal when she became Prime Minister. Hinkley C will be built by EDF, but a third of the cost will be put up by China, which today said it was delighted at the decision. With the details, here's our business correspondent John Moylan.
It's a project on a huge scale. The new nuclear plant at Hinkley Point, with its twin reactors, will provide 7% of the UK's electricity for 60 years. The construction will cost around £18 billion and create 26,000 jobs.
Secretary Dr. Greg Clark.
But it's been on hold for weeks as the government carried out a last-minute review. Today, the Business Secretary confirmed that Hinkley would go ahead and there would be new safeguards for future plants.
This will allow the UK government to take a fair and consistent approach to the national security implications of critical infrastructure, including nuclear energy, in the future. These changes mean that while the UK will remain one of the most open economies in the world, the public can be confident that foreign direct investment works always in the country's best interests.
The French energy giant EDF agreed to fund the project back in July. But amid concerns over the role of EDF's Chinese partners, who want to bring their own reactor technology to Britain, the government launched a review. Today it announced new safeguards which would prevent the sale of EDF's controlling stake during the construction phase without prior agreement. The government will also take a special share in all future nuclear plants, allowing control over how stakes in the projects are sold. And it will review the Enterprise Act to ensure proper scrutiny of foreign ownership of our critical infrastructure. But today, EDF welcomed the news.
First of all, I would like to say very clearly how delighted I am that the government has taken this decision. It's great news for the customers, it's a big boost for the UK industry, it's a great step in the fight against climate change.
But some say Hinkley may never be built. Similar reactors here in northern France and in Finland are years behind schedule and billions over budget. And rivals warn that consumers will pay the price, as EDF will receive a guaranteed amount for the power that Hinkley will generate, which is more than twice the recent wholesale level.
Where's the cost go now? It needs to be coming down, and they need to show that by that further investment, by efficiency gains, they can push the cost down and make it a better deal for UK consumers.
And critics say there's other ways to keep the lights on in the future, that the UK should be backing more renewables like wind power rather than outdated technology from the past.
Well, what we really need to be doing right now is investing in the renewables, in wind, which is already available, offshore wind, cheaper than Hinkley will be. We need to invest in solar so that people can have this on the roofs of their houses, put that together with batteries, and they could be getting revenues as well as bills.
The government's intervention may have raised eyebrows with investors worldwide, but this green light for Hinkley will provide a huge boost to the economy of southwest England, and it means Britain is entering a new nuclear era. John Moylan, BBC News.
Well, in a moment, we'll get the latest from our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, in Westminster. But first, to our correspondent, Dave Harvey, who's at Hinkley Point. This decision has been a while coming, but looking behind you, it looks as though they're not hanging about.
Absolutely, Simon. You want full storms. They've had at least 3 years of full storms here. Helicopters flying in with prime ministers, Chinese dignitaries, French business executives, all coming down to Somerset to declare the dawn of a new nuclear age. Each time, though, only to be put on hold as another hurdle has cropped up, as we heard in John Moylan's report. But today really does seem to be different. This is really the new first green light for Hinkley. And so this huge area here in Somerset is about to become transformed into what will be Europe's largest building site at £18 billion and 2 reactors on this huge site here, all built in the shadow of the last generation of nuclear power stations. And that's rather the point here in Somerset. Somerset people are no strangers to nuclear power and both the jobs and the controversy that it brings. Lots of controversy, and there is still a very strong Stop Hinkley campaign, but thousands of jobs which are also being welcomed.
Let's go to our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, and why this decision and why now?
I think because the cost of not going ahead was viewed as just too astronomical. There was concern that with an energy crisis looming, how do you keep the lights on? I think Mrs May was also concerned about waving goodbye to 25,000 jobs that were created at Hinkley. There was concern about losing out on billions of pounds worth of Chinese investment. And Mrs May believes she has addressed her concerns about security with new restrictions. Her critics say, well, this is all just window dressing. These new security restrictions are just political fluff designed to conceal the fact that actually the deal Mrs May has signed up to is pretty much the same deal negotiated by David Cameron. So the Chinese still get to build all their nuclear power stations. There's no reduction in the cost. We, the taxpayers, still get an almighty slap in the chops. The security powers, the government already has them, they say. And it raises this question, has, for the first time since she became Prime Minister, Theresa May blinked? Because she pretty much marched us all up to the top of the hill, fueling speculation she was going to tell the Chinese where to get off. Now, she seems to have just marched us down again.
Norman Smith in Westminster and Dave Harvey at Hinkley Point. Thank you both very much. 5 police officers face possible criminal charges over the way they dealt with a man who broke his neck during an incident outside a nightclub. One of the officers has since left the force. Julian Cole, a sports science student, suffered severe brain damage and was left paralysed after being arrested and restrained by police in Bedford. Our Home Affairs correspondent Danny Shaw reports.
Yeah, I'm saying it's not easy to see you. Or is it chatterbox?
She comes here every day to be with her son. Julian Cole is in a residential nursing home and needs round-the-clock care for the rest of his life. The 23-year-old is severely brain damaged and paralysed, barely aware of what's going on around him. But the devotion of his mum, Claudia, is clear to see.
He's still alive. But some people have got the same injury, like they never survive.
It was so different 3 years ago. A talented athlete and football fan, Julian was studying for a degree in sports science and had ambitions to be a coach or PE teacher. But that all changed after a night out in Bedford in May 2013. Julian was arrested and restrained outside a club during an incident involving bouncers and police. He broke his neck, suffering a severe injury to his spinal cord. But the young student was taken to a police station before going to hospital. The actions of the 5 officers involved have been examined in detail by the Independent Police Complaints Commission. It says the officers may have a case to answer for gross misconduct, for the manner in which they carried out their duties and responsibilities, and in the case of 4 officers, for honesty and integrity. One police officer could also face a misconduct charge for use of force that's not believed to be linked to Julian's spinal injury.
I'm incredibly relieved for the family that finally they can see some progress. Obviously the progress is about whether or not the officers will face disciplinary proceedings. For the family, what they would love to see more than that is they'd like to see the CPS make a decision as to whether or not the officers should be charged with any criminal offences arising out of their conduct.
And now for Julian Cole's family, there's the prospect of finding out what happened on the night he was so badly injured.
My hope is I need justice. No matter whatever they did for him, it won't bring him back. But the only thing I need, justice.
It's thought prosecutors will take some months deciding whether to bring charges. In the meantime, Claudia will carry on caring for her son, as she's done every day. Danny Shaw, BBC News.
The BBC is being pressed by the government to reveal details of all employees and presenters who are paid more than £150,000 a year. A clause relating to salaries has been included in a draft of the new BBC Charter, which was published this morning. Up till now, the corporation has resisted the move, arguing that it will affect its ability to attract and retain talent. Our media correspondent David Sillitoe reports.
Jeremy Vine here on BBC Radio 2 and...
They're part of daily life for millions. Our licence fees pay their salaries. So should we know how much the BBC's stars are paid? The government thinks so. Anyone earning more than £150,000 will have their salaries, to the nearest £50,000, made public.
Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport.
The Culture Secretary, Karen Bradley, revealed it as part of the new charter for the BBC.
The Charter sets out new obligations in this regard, including publishing the salaries of those employees and talent who earn more than £150,000.
The BBC has resisted the move in the past, saying it will affect its ability to attract and retain top talent. And after cutting the pay bill by £8 million, some feel this could even push the wage bill back up.
No one else is being required to do this, so it's not only unfair, but it enables the BBC's competitors in a commercial marketplace to dive in and take talent, may even put their talent prices up, and critically, offered a choice between working for Sky or ITV or Channel 4, being paid more and not having to disclose it, and working at the BBC, what are you going to choose?
But the BBC has won a victory in a key area, its independence. The new board which will run the corporation was going to be made up of a mix of government and independent executives that the BBC felt risked making it look like the government state broadcaster. The government has revised its plans. The new board gives a clear majority to BBC and independent executives.
Well, David is with me. Apart from the issue of salaries, will the BBC be happy with this?
It's a mixed bag. For instance, there is going to be extra scrutiny from the National Audit Office and MPs of the BBC's commercial operations, BBC Worldwide, which the BBC feels may hamper its ability to actually go out and make some money that is returned back to the licence fee. But you've got to remember, they've got the big things, the licence fee, the 11-year charter. Those were the issues cleared by the White Paper back in May, and they're still there. So the important victories for the BBC have been won. And you've also got to remember, a year ago, people in government were talking about, say, for instance, should the BBC be putting on programmes at prime time, asking questions about Strictly Come Dancing, or should the News at 10 be going out at the same time as ITV's News at 10? All that has gone away. And on that particular point, there's also a story today about ITV's News at 10, a question about another programme coming along which may knock it out of the schedules, put it out later. It appears, yes, they are looking at a new programme, but ITV says there is no plan to permanently shift their News at 10.
David, thank you very much. David Sillitoe. Hillary Clinton is set to return to the campaign trail today following a bout of pneumonia. At the weekend, the Democratic presidential candidate appeared to stumble while leaving a 9/11 memorial in New York. But Mrs. Clinton's doctor says she is recovering well and is healthy and fit to serve as president. Scotland Yard is investigating a shooting in East Finchley in North London in which a man and a woman have been killed. They've been named locally as Annie Ekofo, who is 52 and a mother of 9 children, and her 21-year-old nephew, Beverly. Leading health experts have warned that the social care system in England is failing to meet the needs of the elderly as financial pressures force councils to restrict the number of people they can help. In a new report, the King's Fund and the Nuffield Trust say that local authority support which older people received was based on where they lived rather than their need. Our social affairs correspondent Alison Holt reports.
OK, you're all right.
Yeah. Anne and Cyril Tomlin find increasingly they need help at home. He has Parkinson's and memory loss. She has problems getting about. Family help a lot, but after she had to go into hospital, they asked their council for support. They found care workers struggling with caseloads.
Sometimes they've given so many people to care for, you don't know what time you're going to have someone come in to put you to bed, get you up in the morning. It's just a nightmare.
And today's report by 2 leading think tanks says the social care system, which helps people with such things as washing, dressing and eating, is failing. It points to ongoing cuts to council care budgets, a growing shortage of the care staff needed to support an ageing population, and it concludes even large home care providers are struggling.
The situation is grave. 2 of the largest national providers of home care in the last year have pulled out of local authority contracts. Many more providers are handing contracts back to the local authorities. And the situation there is perilous, quite frankly. Over the last year, there's been a 40% increase in the number of delays, people stuck in hospital because they were waiting for packages of care at home.
You miss not being able to do your garden, don't you?
The Department of Health says it recognises the pressures, but insists it significantly increased the money available to local authorities to help provide affordable, dignified care. Alison Holt, BBC News.
Well, you can find out the cost of care in your area by using the BBC's online calculator. Enter your postcode, local council name or Northern Ireland Health Board and discover the cost of an hour of home care and information about residential and nursing home fees where you live. It's just after 1:15, our top story this lunchtime. A new £18 billion nuclear power station at Hinkley finally gets the go-ahead, but with new conditions imposed. Coming up, 100 years since they first took to the battlefield, remembering the men in their tanks who changed the face of warfare.
Still to come on South Today, early years campaigners warn of a recruitment crisis in nurseries. And army reservists from the south prepare to train park rangers to help save elephants from poachers in Africa. All that and more in 15 minutes.
Another golden day, a gold rush, a medal fest. We're actually running out of ways to describe the successes of Great Britain's Paralympians in Rio. Their 9 golds yesterday mean they maintain their position second in the table. Dame Sarah Storey and Hannah Cockcroft both won their 2nd golds of the Paralympics and helped to smash the team's gold medal tally at London 2012. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss is in Rio for us. Andy.
Yes, Simon, welcome back to Rio, where, as you say, the medals just keep on coming for the British team. In fact, at one point last night, they won 10 medals in the space of a single hour. Quite extraordinary. It included a 2nd title here for one of the stars of London 2012, Hannah Cockcroft, as Richard Lister now reports.
Cockcroft is coming up to the line.
The start of a golden hour for Paralympics GB with the first of 9 medals, 4 of them gold, in just 63 minutes. The smile said it all. Hannah Cockcroft from Halifax setting a world record in the 400 metres. Driven on, she said, by the fear of losing to her 15-year-old teammate Carrie Adanigan. She took bronze at this, her first games. Soon the Union flag was flying over the pool too. 3 golds to come here, the first from Mikey Jones, who pushed John Fox into silver medal position in the 400-metre freestyle. And they weren't the only 1 too, as Aaron Moores and Scott Quinn went head-to-head in the 100 metres breaststroke. Moores taking gold by just 0.03 of a second. A narrow victory, but just as sweet. Hannah Russell had a little more breathing space. She was the favourite in the 100 metres backstroke, and you can see why. She led from the start and finished with a new world record. A magic hour for British fans, but the rest of the day wasn't bad either.
Kadina Cox on the near side.
Kadina Cox has had perhaps the most memorable debut in Rio. She'd already won gold and set a world record in the cycling. She did it again without the need for a bike. With her 400 metres win, she's the first Briton since 1988 to win medals in 2 sports at 1 Games. Though sadly, no medals for dancing. Para-GB won 34 golds in London 4 years ago. Sarah Story made it 35 in Rio in the time trials. By the end of the day, the figure stood at 43 golds, with 4 days of competition still to come. Richard Lister, BBC News.
Yes, another great day for the British team. I'm delighted to be joined by one of the British gold medalists here, Jo Butterfield, who won gold in the club throw event. Many congratulations, Jo.
Thank you very much.
First of all, what does it mean to have that gold medal hanging around your neck?
It's unbelievable. It kind of means that dreams can come true. It's what we've worked for like, I was injured 5 years ago, and so for the last 2.5 years, me and my coaches have been working for this. And to come here and smash it and do what we want is just fantastic.
And you did it in some style too, with a world record. Was it a day when everything just clicked for you?
It was, yeah. I'd had a bit of a trouble in holding camp, if I'm honest, and I was carrying a little bit of a niggle. But I knew I'd come here in the best shape I could, and I just needed to execute that throw. And the second throw was perfect, you know, and it felt so easy, it felt effortless, and that's nice. And you know, I'm just so happy, to be honest.
Yeah, the club throw is an event that's specific to the Paralympics, isn't it? Just tell us a little bit about how you got into it and what the secret is.
To be honest, I'd never heard of the club throw like most people. It's an event that's for higher level disability people, and it's aimed at people who don't have any grip in their hands and little power in their arms. So it's probably the trick about it is the impairment of the individual themselves. Like, you think, how can somebody without arm power or grip throw something? But it's designed in a special way that it can fit inside my hand. I can hold it in my hand and it dangles down. The weight is at the bottom, so it enables me to be able to take part in such a fantastic event, you know, and to have that feeling, even though I am limited within my mobility, is just quite a privilege, really.
Jo Butterfield, many, many congratulations on your gold medal, and the success just keeps on coming for the British team, because I can tell you in the last few minutes there have been 2 more gold medals in the canoeing. The first time canoeing has taken place in the Paralympics, including a gold medal for Jeanette Chippington, so yet more success for the British team.
Andy, thank you very much. And you can follow all the action, or try and keep up anyway, from the Paralympics across the BBC. There's live commentary on BBC Radio 5 Live. The BBC Sport website will have the latest throughout the Games, and you can sign up for medal alerts via the BBC Sport app. More confidential medical records from leading athletes have been leaked by hackers who targeted the World Anti-Doping Agency database. Cyclists Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome are among those whose details have now been made public. While sports correspondent Natalie Perks joins me. This is the first time GB athletes have been named. What's been the reaction?
Well, WADA has condemned this criminal activity. It believes it's retaliation for the McLaren report, which, as you remember, alleged state-sponsored Russian doping led to more than 100 Russian athletes being absent from this summer. The key thing is that none of these athletes named, Simone Biles, Serena Williams as well, Bradley Wiggins, etc., have done anything wrong. All the substances had TUEs, that's a therapeutic use exemption, which means a doctor has cleared them to use it for an existing medical condition. In the case of Sir Bradley Wiggins, who's of course Britain's most decorated Olympian, he had TUEs for substances commonly found in inhalers, and in the last hour his spokesman said there's nothing new here. Everyone knows Brad suffers from asthma, and like all Team GB athletes, he follows WADA regulations to the letter. In the case of Chris Froome, who won the Tour de France for the 3rd time this summer, the TUE was for a steroid called prednisol, and he's released a statement saying, "I've openly discussed my TUEs with the media and have no issues with the leak, which only confirms my statements. In 9 years as a professional, I've twice required a TUE for exacerbated asthma, the last time in 2014. Now, the Kremlin has denied any government involvement. It's even said it will help WADA if they ask for help, but Team GB has warned all its athletes that they could be next on the hackers' radar.
Natalie, thank you very much. Natalie Perks. The new leader of UKIP is due to be announced at the party's conference tomorrow after ballots closed just over an hour ago. Whoever wins will have big shoes to fill following the departure of Nigel Farage. Our political correspondent Ellie Price has been looking at the challenges facing the new leader of the party.
Do you think you are kidding, Mr Smith, if you think UKIP are on the run?
This is what taking the fight to Labour looks like. UKIP campaigners outside the constituency office of the Labour leadership contender, Owen Smith.
Brexit means Brexit.
On the morning of the 24th of June, UKIP was celebrating, pulling off the exact thing they were set up to do more than 20 years ago, take Britain out of the EU. But even in the heady moment of victory, their leader was looking to the future.
Remember that UKIP's appeal is way beyond Conservatives. Who knows? We could become the new Labour Party.
The party sees an opportunity in Labour heartland, like this part of South Wales, where the vote to leave the EU was above the national average. As with most of the Welsh valleys, there's been a Labour MP here in Pontypridd for nearly 100 years. And yet, there's evidence that UKIP is making inroads. Just up the road in Merthyr Tydfil, the party came second in the last general election. It also increased its vote share in this year's Welsh Assembly elections. But the challenge here will be convincing voters that UKIP still has a role following that Brexit vote. The former Tory minister and reality TV star Neil Hamilton leads the UKIP group on the Welsh Assembly. He says there is life after Brexit.
Our USP was getting out of the EU, and we've achieved that. But we've gone beyond that now, we were a one-man band in most people's eyes. Well, Nigel Farage ceases to be leader. A new team has to be brought in, and I think a more collegiate style of leadership will show to the public at large that we are more than just a one-issue party or a one-man leader.
But there's another problem. UKIP is a divided party. Here in Wales, for example, one of the 7 UKIP Assembly members recently decided to stand as an independent because he couldn't work with his colleagues.
It's just very hard to imagine how this particular party can keep going in the same form. But I think there's potentially a future for something like UKIP, whether it's UKIP or some successor organisation, depending on the position that the UK government takes in Brexit negotiations.
The long-term success of UKIP will depend on decisions made in the coming weeks and months. The new leader has a lot of work to do. Ellie Price, BBC News, Pontypridd.
100 years ago today, a tank was used on the battlefield for the first time. It was at the Battle of the Somme, which is regarded as the bloodiest in British military history, with 57,000 casualties on the first day alone. Our correspondent Robert Hall looks back at a day that changed the face of warfare.
Crawling out of the smoke on a September morning, the lumbering monsters changed the world's armies forever.
Even in World War I, you can see elements that are true to tank warfare right to this day, and why the army has tanks today. It has a fear factor. From the German side, we have contemporary accounts, and I think there's that first impact of sheer terror.
Governments had been trying to come up with a way to break the stalemate. They found the answer here, in tracked farm vehicles. The early tanks were initially known as land ships. More than 40 were supposed to be in the first attack. Only 9 made it through to German lines.
Conditions for the early tank men were horrendous. There was the sound and the heat from this engine. The temperature in here could get up to 50 degrees centigrade. Add to that the smoke and the fumes which made many of the soldiers ill. And the fact that the tank had no suspension, which meant that the 8 men were thrown around in this enclosed space like rag dolls.
And you see the netting on the...
Janet Lee's father, Reginald Laverty, drove one of the tanks in that first attack. He and his crew were forced to flee for their lives.
The underside of his chin was deeply pockmarked. He was the driver, and he had a mask of chainmail with little goggles. He must have been wearing one of those. So his face was protected, but his underside of the chin wasn't.
Reginald Laverty and his comrades would scarcely have believed where the tank's story has taken it. What did today's tankies make of life in this slow, noisy metal box a century ago?
Being shot at for the first time in vehicles they hadn't really practiced with, it must have been a terrifying experience.
A lot of the guys back then didn't even know what they were getting themselves in for.
To do what they did, hats off to them.
It's a massive thing to be proud of as a tankie, definitely.
Tanks have evolved and they're still evolving, but in this high-tech, fast-moving age, have the giants had their day?
we think the tank's over, but we find we need it again. So sadly, for good or ill, or however you want to look at it, I think we are going to need tanks again in the future.
But Tim Howe, we heard your guys in that report talking about their respect for the past, but things have changed so much. Is there still a real link between the guys we see here today and the guys who drove that tank behind us?
Yes, there is, absolutely. I mean, when the men 100 years ago engaged forward gear and advanced into no man's land, they set new standards of courage, determination and selflessness that we live by today. They advanced into a maelstrom of shell fire and machine gun fire. They held their nerve and they fought their tanks forward to get the infantry onto the objective and win. And
you saw that tank moving today, extraordinary sight.
Extraordinary, the pace at which it went, which is very slowly being thrown around by the battlefield and battered by shell fire. The determination to press home that attack is bewildering by anyone's standards.
Tim Howe, thank you very much indeed. Well, if we'd had tabloids back then as we do now, that would have been the headline. It's not about today. This ceremony has been about the past. Back to you.
Robert Hall, thank you very much. Let's have a look at the weather now. Here's Alex Deakin.
Thanks, Simon. Plenty going on with the weather over the next day or so. Let's deal with the temperatures first of all, because they have been remarkable. We could get 30 Celsius again today, the third day in a row. That hasn't happened in September since 1929. However, things are going to change. Today will be the last day of 30 Celsius for a while at least, because we're going to get thunderstorms tonight, and tomorrow it will be much, much cooler, leading into a much fresher feel as we go into the weekend. Plenty of fine weather around this weekend, but it will be noticeably cooler. Temperatures back closer to average, and good news, you've been having trouble sleeping because those nights will be cooler too. Why cooler? Well, we've got a cold front approaching very slowly at the moment, but it is this band of cloud you can see on the satellite picture. Ahead of that, different type of cloud smearing its way across eastern Scotland, northeast England overnight, making for a misty, murky, foggy start for some, as you can see here in Kings Barnes. And the eastern side of Scotland, the far northeast of England, close to the coast, will cling on to that mist and low cloud today. Elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, but we're starting to see those showers and thunderstorms break out across the south later on. And here's the weather front too, bringing some outbreaks of rain across western Scotland, trickling in to Northern Ireland. For the bulk of Scotland, Northern Ireland, dry, bright temperatures into the 20s, but noticeably cooler where that mist and low cloud sticks on those North Sea coasts. Most of England and Wales, well over 20 Celsius. We could get 30 degrees, and then we are watching those storms starting to develop later this afternoon. They could get very lively through the evening rush hour. Flashes of lightning, large amounts of rain falling in a short space of time. Hailstorms as well, and they spread into the Midlands, southeast England. And as the weather front joins in the fun, well, most places will turn soggy by first thing tomorrow morning. Those downpours, as I say, could cause some problems. One more really warm and humid night, but notice temperatures starting to drop off in the west. And actually for Northern Ireland and Wales, fine day tomorrow, but across the east there'll still be a lot of heavy rain early on. And for eastern England, well, we'll keep the risk of downpours, potentially further thunderstorms till very late in the day. Most places, though, do brighten up with some sunshine, and those temperatures back much closer to the September average. It'll start to feel like mid-September with highs of pleasant enough 17 or 18 degrees. Turning chilly on Friday night, bump of high pressure, meaning most places having a fine weekend, but that weather front never completely clears, and it could provide a lot of cloud across the east with 1 or 2 showers. For most, though, Saturday is a dry and a fine day. We do see another weather front bringing rain into the northwest again on Sunday, but again, for most places, some fine weather this weekend, just not as hot as it has been. So,
Alex, thank you very much. A reminder of our top story this lunchtime. A new £18 billion nuclear power station at Hinkley finally gets the go-ahead, but with new conditions imposed. That's all from us now on BBC One. Time for the news where you are. From me, good afternoon.